So I'm very much driven by inequities in women's health.
Uh-huh.
Ovarian cancer is underfunded, it's underprioritized. As I've mentioned, it's often diagnosed too late. But also on a personal level, I have endometriosis, and that really, showed me what it's like to be a woman in trying to navigate the healthcare system, a system that wasn't built for women in mind. My postdoc research was focused on leader cells. They lead ovarian cancer cells to invade into healthy tissue. They lead the charge in chemotherapy resistance, in disease recurrence when the disease comes back.
Welcome to a new episode of With Science. At With Science, our goal is to promote local science on a global scale. Today, we have a special guest, Dr. Amy Wilson, and we're going to talk about ovarian cancer. She is an ovarian cancer scientist and also a senior research advisor for the Ovarian Cancer Research Foundation. Thank you, Amy, for accepting my invitation to be part of this podcast. And we're talking about the different aspects of ovarian cancer.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
Awesome. So we as scientists, we are driven by curiosity. And that curiosity starts in the early stages of life when we were children. So please share with us, what were the first memories that you remember of having that curiosity that later turned into a scientific drive?
Yeah, I think there are kind of two major things that drove me to have a career in science or drove me to be a scientist. The first thing, as you said, is curiosity. I've always had that curiosity from when I was a young child. I was incredibly fascinated by cells, by things that you couldn't see, like viruses, like bacteria. What is happening, at that microscopic level? That's what really interested me. And also what interested me was what is happening with our bodies when something goes wrong, when we have a disease. The second reason that I was interested in science was a bit more of a personal reason. So when I was quite young, I lost my grandmother and my uncle to motor neuron disease, which is a neurodegenerative disorder that has no cure. So that really drove me to try and understand what is happening in our bodies when something goes wrong. And it kind of made me think about what can we do to fix that. And it wasn't just specific to MND, it was specific to all kind of diseases. And that's really what got me into cancer biology in the first place. I actually want to share a fun fact with you. I didn't always plan to go into science. I actually started by doing a Bachelor of Music, at
Oh, wow,
university.
really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So my first year of university was in music because I had so many hobbies growing up. I couldn't pick what I wanted to do. And then I decided that wasn't my passion. So I transferred into science and I never looked back.
So now that you're talking about the music part, how do you think science relates to music or vice versa?
I think that's a really interesting question and not something that I've thought about for a long time. But I definitely think there is some kind of evolutionary basis for music. We as humans have this ability to create music that has been conserved in our genomes for generations upon generations. I think it is critical to human development and critical to our mental health, as you could see during COVID as well. I know I got through with a lot of music, so I think there's definitely some kind of interplay between music and science.
Yeah, because now that you said that, I'm just thinking about my background is geneticist. So
Yeah.
I was thinking about DNA, and the DNA has 4 letters, right? And then it's basically creating a symphony from 4 letters and the different combinations, etc. And also you have all the different attenuators or things that change. For example, the epigenetic, methylation, etc., acetylation, all the histones that might affect, the level of the sound. It's quite interesting, yeah.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
So going back to your journey, so how that, initial exposure to the curiosity as well as your personal story, so shape into your journey to becoming a scientist?
Yeah. So when I transferred into my science degree, I did a Bachelor of Medical Bioscience at Monash University. I was doing it at the Gippsland campus of Monash, which is in regional Victoria. This is where I grew up. It was a really small university. We had probably between 15 and 30 people in our classes for each class. So it was super tight knit. I was in classes alongside vet students and engineers as well. So it was quite diverse. I really enjoyed that environment, but I also realized that I was at a little bit of a disadvantage because there were opportunities that I missed out on
Uh-huh.
compared to if I had gone to a university in a city. I did do a semester in Malaysia as well during my undergrad degree, which gave me an idea of kind of the international scientific scope, which was really great experience. And then when I finished my undergrad degree, I wanted to do an honors year, which is, as you know, a research year, because I didn't know what I wanted to do and I wanted to get experience in the research field. So I knew that if I wanted to focus on something that I was interested in at the time, I wanted to study some kind of disease, which ended up being ovarian cancer. I had to move to the city, which was Melbourne.
Uh-huh.
The honours projects that were at my university were very much environmental science, which isn't really what I was interested in. So I made the big move to Melbourne. I did a research year in the ovarian cancer space. That was in 2015, and I've stayed in ovarian cancer research or that kind of ovarian cancer space ever since because I absolutely loved it. I loved my honours year. I didn't always know that I wanted to do a PhD either. I'm not from an academic background. My family aren't from academia. My mum was the first person in our family to graduate from university, and she finished when I was in year 12. So she bet me by 4 years, which I was a bit annoyed about. No. So yeah, I never really saw kind of academia as a path for me, but I really enjoyed my honours year, and my supervisors convinced me to do a PhD, and I loved doing research. So I thought, all right, why not? Let's do a PhD.
You mentioned about some limitations in terms of your university degree in the campus that was outside of Melbourne and regional Victoria. So what were the challenges in terms of, what was the transition in terms of moving from regional to back to the big city, which is Melbourne?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest thing for me was networking.
Yeah.
Like you don't really get that huge research network in the
Uh-huh.
country. I will say I really enjoyed being at a regional campus, and we were doing our exams with this beautiful country backdrop instead of, a depressing, I don't know, plain room. So I did really enjoy it, but I think those kind of networks, those connections, the ability to use state of the art infrastructure as well,
Uh-huh.
technologies. I remember going to the honors lab for the first time and I thought, wow, this lab has its own mass spectrometer. I've never seen this. When I did a research project during my third year at the regional university. And I remember we were spinning PCR plates, so plates that have your samples in it. We were putting them in a salad spinner and spinning them instead of putting them in a centrifuge. So, yeah, I think they're probably the two things that are most notable for me, that, lack of networking connections and the access to technology.
Yeah. So before we were starting this recording, we were talking about the different my background, which is melanoma, leukemia, lymphoma. But your background is in ovarian cancer. So could you
Yes.
please share your PhD thesis in lay terms about in ovarian cancer?
Yes, you are testing me. I haven't done this in a long time. But essentially, ovarian cancer is the most deadly gynecological cancer. There's no early detection test. Most symptoms are vague and non-specific. So unfortunately, the majority of cases are diagnosed at a late stage where treatment is
Uh-huh.
complex, resistance and recurrence is quite common. So what my PhD was looking at was immunotherapy. Now, immunotherapy is a type of therapy that it makes your immune system better recognize and attack the tumor, because inherently your immune system is actually quite good at eliminating cancer, but cancer has ways of hiding from the immune system. And that's a massive problem in ovarian cancer. Immunotherapy has been transformative in treating some other cancer types like melanoma, which is what you've focused on in the past, but we haven't seen as many successes in ovarian cancer. So my PhD project was focused on why and how we can improve this. So I was looking at repurposing a drug that's actually currently used to treat type 2 diabetes. It's called sitagliptin. I haven't said that word in many, many years. So what sitagliptin does is it blocks an enzyme that is being overexpressed by the ovarian tumor. So it's being produced by ovarian tumors. What that enzyme does is it deactivates chemokines. Now, chemokines are signals that tell the immune system to come to the tumor and attack it. So because this enzyme was blocking the chemokines, the immune system couldn't recognize the tumor anymore. The tumor could grow unchecked. So when you block this enzyme with sitagliptin, it means that the chemokines aren't blocked anymore, and the T cells, which are the immune cells that recognize and eliminate the cancer, it means that it's a way of, I guess, supplementing existing therapies with the immune system to make sure that the cancer is eliminated. So what we did was we tested sitagliptin with standard of care chemotherapy. We found that the immune system did respond better to the cancer, but the effects were quite modest and it was unlikely to cause any kind of survival benefit in patients by itself. And I guess the key takeaway from this is that research is still important because it gave us really important insights about ovarian cancer and how it interacts with the immune system. And it also tells us about why it's such a complex disease to treat. So it's really important to kind of build those other studies in the immunotherapy realm for the future.
Great. I think when you do PhD, because you repeat so many times the same story for 4 years, it's like riding a bike.
It is, yeah.
We never forget.
Never forget.
So, never forget.
The trauma.
I was certainly it is. You were mentioning about the ovarian cancer, and when I was reading about it, there are different types of ovarian cancer, some with better prognosis or with worse prognosis. What's the difference in terms of the different types? Because I think there is epithelial, which is in the layer of the ovary.
Yep.
But could you please expand on the different types of ovarian cancer?
Yeah, sure. So ovarian cancer can come from different cell types. Like you said, there's epithelial ovarian cancer. The epithelial layer that surrounds the outside of the ovary. A lot of, or the majority of epithelial ovarian cancers actually come from the fallopian tube. So the fallopian tube sits very, very closely to the ovaries, and these epithelial cells can come off and stick to the outside of the ovary. There are multiple types of epithelial ovarian cancer, and the types of epithelial ovarian cancer can depend on its biological characteristics, what genetics, what mutations it's carrying, what they look like under the microscope. But there's other types of ovarian cancers that can either derive from the egg cells within the ovaries or from the stromal cells within the ovaries, which are the supporting structures. Every type of ovarian cancer is different from one another. There are over 30 different biological subtypes of ovarian cancer, which is why, it's such a complex disease. And yeah, as you said, some ovarian cancers have good prognoses. The most common type of ovarian cancer, which is a type of epithelial ovarian cancer, high-grade serous ovarian cancer, which accounts for about 70% of cases, has a pretty dismal prognosis. And the main reason for that is that most of them are diagnosed at a late stage when the disease has already metastasized. So it's a lot harder to treat.
Yeah, because it's hard to detect, right? Because in the breast cancer, you're having autism, but then in the ovarian, it's very hard to identify because there are no diagnostic tools.
Yeah, and that's a massive issue in ovarian cancer diagnostics as well. When you go to the doctor and you say, I have these symptoms, if they're symptoms of ovarian cancer, they can include abdominal pain, abdominal bloating, struggling to eat, struggling to urinate, reflux. A lot of patients are actually sent to, the wrong specialist. They might be sent to a gastrointestinal specialist. So it's really hard to diagnose.
Yeah. And then when we're talking ovarian cancer as well as and breast cancer, so there is a big proportion that is inherited. So could you please comment on the inherited ovarian cancer?
Yeah, sure. So it really depends on the study. I've seen lots of different percentages floating around. Between, I would say, 15 to 25% of ovarian cancers are inherited. And the biggest, most recognizable genetic mutations or inherited mutations are the BRCA1 and the
Mhm.
BRCA2 genes. These can also increase risk of breast cancer. That's why they were named BRCA genes, because they were discovered in breast cancer first.
Okay.
But individuals with a BRCA mutation can take preventative strategies as well, although those preventative strategies are quite extreme. You don't really
Yeah.
want to remove your ovaries, because if you remove your ovaries, you go through menopause. So it really is a difficult thing.
I think now that you're touching on that, is like
Mm,
maybe a decade ago, Angelina Jolie became very famous because she was carrier of that particular mutation in BRCA, and then
mm.
she removed the breast as well as the uterus. Yeah.
But what annoys me about that situation was it's great. It's great that she was raising so much awareness about BRCA mutations and what you can do to reduce your risk of developing cancer. But no one said anything about ovaries at that time. And I think ovaries is something that a lot of women feel uncomfortable talking about.
Mhm.
It's, a little bit awkward to talk about your ovaries. But I think, it's incredibly important because awareness saves lives.
Of course, it's very important.
Yeah.
And then you did a PhD and you moved to within the same institute. You moved to another lab, working on ovarian cancer as well.
Yeah.
So how was the transition? Because some scientists, when they finish PhD, they are sick of the particular field of interest, and then they wanted to change to a different one. In your case, you decided to stay with ovarian cancer. Why?
Yeah. I will say I did move on to a different project, like you said, for my postdoc, and I was very happy to be off my PhD project because, everyone gets sick of their PhD project. You're doing the same thing for 4 years. But I really wanted to stay in ovarian cancer because it was something that I was passionate about. And our lab, just before I finished my PhD, were given a large grant, and it was in the ovarian cancer space, but it was a different project, and
Hmm.
it was something that really excited me. And I was lucky enough that there was salary in that grant for me for 3 years. So when, they asked me to stay, I said, absolutely. I love this project and I would be honored to work on it. And I'm kind of glad. I mean, I really loved the research, but at the same time, I started my postdoc in 2019. So just after that COVID hit in
Hmm.
2020. So I was very happy that I was able to stay in an environment that I was familiar with. I was able to stay in Melbourne, in my home. It all worked out.
Yeah, and then what was the project about when you started doing your postdoc?
Yeah. So my postdoc research was focused on a special group of cells called leader cells.
Huh?
Now, leader cells do kind of what they say in the name. They lead. So they lead ovarian cancer cells to invade into healthy tissue. They lead the charge in chemotherapy resistance, in disease recurrence when the disease comes back. I think a really good analogy for leader cells is that they are weeds in a garden. If you are tending to your garden and you cut all of the grass and you cut all of the weeds off, that's fine. It looks like there's no more plants there,
Huh?
but the root of the weed is still there. That root is your leader cells. You need to be able to deal with those leader cells, pull them out by the root. Otherwise, the ovarian cancer is going to come back. So what I was looking at, firstly, we were looking at the biology of leader cells and understanding why they were causing chemoresistance and disease
Uh-huh.
recurrence. We were also looking at repurposing drugs that were able to specifically target leader cells and eliminate leader cells. So we tested lots of different drugs in combination with standard of care therapy. And then we showed that targeting leader cells could not only reduce ovarian cancer recurrence, but it could actually improve the way that the immune system recognizes the ovarian cancer. So we're coming back to the importance of the immune system in ovarian cancer. We also used quite a lot of 3D models, organoids. So these are cancer cells that are in a 3D structure compared to on the bottom of a plate. And these models were really great because it meant that we could look at the cancer cells in an environment that better represents how these cancer cells would behave in a patient.
You were mentioning about you were talking about that these leader cells, they were those ones that are driving metastasis, the tumor spreading.
Yeah.
What makes them move from the cancer to invade other sites? I guess so. One of the two main issues in cancer is one is metastasis, where the cells they start to invade, and there is that tumor spreading, and that's why we see the different stages when you see metastasize because it's totally full blown. The cells invade, but the other part is the treatment resistance, which is what we are talking about, the leader cells that are driving chemoresistance. Because those two are the main causes of death in cancer. And if we are able to control those two, be able to sort of attack the cells, all the cells, and eradicate them, great, right? But then there is some that escape, and there is other ones that escape the treatment, and others that they decided to go and wander around and be able to sort of niche or invade other places. So what makes them, those leader cells, having that characteristic which is different to the other cells that are in the tumor?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and which doesn't have a simple answer.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, they upregulate, so express high levels of certain molecules that allow them to hide from the immune system. So that's one way.
Mm-hmm.
They have the way that their cytoskeleton is organized, so the structure that holds up the cell, and also the structures that allow cells to invade into other tissues is different to normal cells. Invasion is a very active process. There is a lot of stuff going on. So we found that there's a lot going on with that kind of cytoskeleton, that invasion mechanisms that allow them to spread and metastasize. They also like to change the levels of proteins that mediate whether a cell will die or not. So apoptosis is the process of, cells dying. And when you treat with chemotherapy, a lot of the times that triggers the cell to go into apoptosis. Leader cells can change their apoptosis proteins, which means that they don't actually die. That is just one of many ways, and that is what a lot of our research was focused on, the actual biology and the why leader cells are doing this and how they're doing this.
One of the things you mentioned before about the tumor evasion is interesting, right? Because it's like it seems like a deterministic sort of system where the immune cells are sort of surveilling this cell. They say, oh, normal. And then the tumor cells are sort of, they are displaying all these features or not displaying proteins. And then so the immune cells cannot recognize them.
Yep.
And it's quite interesting how, it seems like a hide and seek sort of process where the immune cells are sort of, their capabilities to be able to check all the cells. There are different checkpoints across in the cells and in the immune system as well. But it's interesting how those are able to escape because if the immune cell is able, but you were mentioning also about immunotherapy, that it's not working that well compared to melanoma, for example, with pembrolizumab, etc. So why is that? Because there is always, before in some episodes, we were discussing with Francois, I think, Narutha, about hot and cold sort of tumors. So could you please expand on that?
Yeah. And I think, like the previous question, there are so many reasons why ovarian cancers don't respond well to immunotherapy. Something that I thought of was, if you think about the way that our immune system responds to a bacteria or a virus that has infected our body, what the cells that have been infected do is they have these molecules on the surface and they project a tiny little sequence that has, just say, the viral sequence on there, and they say, look at me, it's like a little flag, look at me, I'm infected, come and help me. Cancer cells are meant to do that too. They're meant to say, hello, I am a cell that is growing uncontrollably, please kill me, essentially. But cancer cells have a way of down-regulating those surface molecules so that that help signal isn't shown as well. You were talking about hot and cold tumors. A lot of ovarian cancers are cold because they have such high levels of immunosuppressive proteins and chemokines. So one of those, for example, is PDL1, which I'm sure that you know about. Because this is present in ovarian cancers, if you're treating ovarian cancer with, just say, a PD-1 inhibitor, which binds to T cells and means that they're not suppressed anymore, they can be activated, the T cells will go to the ovarian tumor, and because there's still all of these suppressed molecules around, they'll just switch off. Even if you can get the T cells to the cancer, they get there and they're like, whatever, nothing to see here. And that's just one example. There's so many mechanisms, and that's why the field of immune oncology and immunotherapy is massive, because it's something that could really make a difference in ovarian cancer survival rates. But unfortunately, there's just so much going on in the tumor microenvironment.
Yeah, and we both share the same interest in terms of treatment-resistant cells. You call them leader cells. For me, in pediatric leukemia, we call them treatment-resistant cells. It's interesting, for example, that the treatments that are being developed, and I was reflecting on this recently, like they're always targeting the bulk cells, those ones that are sensitive to the tumor, to the treatment. And then we have so little understanding. That's why your research is quite important, to be able to understand why those treatment-resistant cells or those leader cells are the ones that are driving metastasis and resistance, etc. So to develop treatments targeting those particular cells, because targeting those cells that have the capacity to regrow the tumor, then might have a better chance to preventing relapse, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you said it, it's so important to look at treatments that specifically target leader cells and those tumor resistant cells, because chemotherapy does a really good job of eliminating the bulk of the tumor cells. But what about, that 1%, that 0.5 or 0.1 or 0.001% of cells? Yeah. Where the research really needs to sit.
You just need one cell that's resistant to the treatment.
No, I don't know how many there are. It really depends on the tumor. Yeah. The leader cells, they represent a mixed percentage, a mixed very small percentage of tumors.
So you were talking about drug repurposing, and what is the meaning of that? And also, what is the challenges and the benefits of doing repurposing drugs?
Yeah. Drug repurposing is a way of looking at drugs that are already used in the clinic for other indications for ovarian cancer or for another disease. Repurposing is highly beneficial because it's cheaper. The drugs, we already know that they're safe, so you don't have to go through all of those phase 1 trials to make sure that they're safe. And that also means that they're cost effective. You don't have to go through all of those approval processes. They're already approved. So that opens up massive opportunities in the cancer space, being able to use other drugs for your disease of interest. Like you said, there are also many challenges to repurposing. So repurposing is really great for precision medicine, which is a way of looking at a tumor's characteristics to decide what therapy to give. There are issues with this. I mean, it's a really exciting prospect, but the limitations are, number one, that ovarian cancer is very heterogeneous, which means not all ovarian cancer cells are the same. They're very different, even within the same patient. So tumors can respond very differently between patients. So it's really hard to identify repurposed drugs that are going to be consistent across the whole population. With drug repurposing and with precision medicine, you also need biomarkers that tell you whether a patient is going to respond to that therapy. You need to be able to look at those biomarkers, whether it's in the blood or in the tumor tissue. It's probably most likely going to be in the tumor tissue, but that takes a lot of research as well. So we need, more and more research to identify biomarkers that would tell us if a patient will respond to a certain therapy. There are infrastructure demands So you need people to actually do the work, do the experiments. And in Australia, we don't really have that infrastructure set up at the moment. It would be really great to see increased investment in precision medicine infrastructure from the government. You know, it takes a lot of money, a lot of staff training to actually implement something like that. The other thing is there's ethical and there's equity concerns as well. So you've got your ethical concerns because there are particular populations of people that might not want their tumors to be genomically profiled because, you know, their family may have had a bad experience with genomic profiling in the past. And equity concerns as well. If you're someone that's in a regional or rural area and you don't have access to the best care, not just the best care, but, you know, the best facilities, then you're going to be left behind. So I think repurposing and precision medicine is incredibly exciting. And I definitely think it's the future of cancer therapy. These are the considerations, you know, that need to be thought about and need to be invested in.
Fantastic. As scientists, we have many failures and few eureka moments.
Yeah.
Could you please share some of those that impacted
Yeah.
your career?
Yeah. Okay. Science is very much full of experiments that don't really go to plan, but I think that's part of science.
Mhm.
You know, that those setbacks that you experience in the lab, they teach you persistence and they teach you how to problem solve, and they're very much part of the process. And I think science for me isn't really about a massive eureka moment. It's about forming those hypotheses and testing your assumptions and gradually adding to the collective knowledge, but also making sure that that knowledge is aligned with the needs and the priorities of those affected by the disease. If I could think of, I guess, one, I'm not going to talk about all the specific challenges, but I'll talk about a specific exciting moment, was really when I was doing the leader cell work and analyzing. We didn't even know that it would have any kind of impact on the immune system and the way that the immune system recognizes ovarian cancer. But I was analyzing the flow cytometry data, which is, you know, a very complex method you use to characterize immune cells. I'm sure you're familiar with it. It sometimes is a bit of a pain in the ass. But yeah,
Yes, it is.
seeing that leader cells were impacting the immune system was something that was really exciting. And to me, I think it was that moment of just sitting at your computer, analyzing the data, clicking, you know, run, putting it in a graph and saying, oh my God, this is actually making a difference. So I think, yeah, little moments like that where you think about the implications and you think, wow, I'm the first person to see this is really exciting. I don't think I
Yeah,
answered your question, but yeah.
you did. So, in addition to curiosity, we are driven by having an impact, that our work makes an impact into communities, into vulnerable communities. And then you were thriving in the ovarian research, ovarian cancer research, and doing successfully. What made you move to the Ovarian Cancer Research Foundation as an advisory?
Yeah, so I had been doing my postdoc for a couple of years. I absolutely loved the science itself, but I guess there, you know, there is that weight of those, the system, you know, systemic barriers, the limited funding, inequity in women's health research, women's careers in research, bias, and, you know, a level of bullying that wasn't really acceptable. So I wanted to change. And this job came up. I was looking at lots of different jobs actually. I was looking at other postdoc roles, but this job as research advisor at the OCRF came up and I thought, well, I'll go for that. I have a lot of knowledge in ovarian cancer research, but I don't actually know anything about working in a foundation and governance and policies. But it seems like I was a good fit. I've been there for 2.5 years almost. But yeah, moving wasn't really an easy choice. I kind of saw it as a transitional state, as a way to kind of collect my thoughts and think, okay, I'm just here temporarily. But then I ended up really enjoying it. And as you said, seeing the impact that a research foundation can have in the research space.
You wrote a very well written, very personal paper I
Thank you.
really enjoy it, and I recommend everyone to read it. It's great. How do you identify those transferable skills? Because sometimes it's hard to move. Even though it's ovarian cancer research to ovarian cancer foundation, it may be very challenging to sort of move to the other
Yeah.
side of the pond, I guess.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I really had that issue to start off with, but I think you really have to think about what you do in the research field and break those down by task. So I did a lot of writing reports, writing grants, writing papers. That can apply to writing policy, writing research communication, knowledge translation. I supervised quite a lot of students as well. You can apply that to project management, to
Mhm.
person management. Yeah, I think it's really about breaking down things task by task and seeing how you can apply that, because a PhD actually does train you for a lot of things. It's not just your research. It
Mhm.
trains you for a massive range of things. Yeah.
Yeah. So in Australia, as you said, one of the limitations is funding. The
Hmm.
funding input is not enough for all the fantasy research and science that's happening in Australia. That's a reality that we face, and we scientists we are depending on federal funding and also local funding, etc., from the government, from NHMRC, which is the part the council that relates to funding research in Australia. So the research foundations play, a big role into funding the research that cannot be funded, is not funded by the government. It's not that it's a bad science. It's so competitive. So of the thousands applications that they are submitted every year, only I think it's 13% that are successful.
Yeah. Or
So
less.
or less. So then the foundation, research foundations, cancer research foundation, etc., and ovarian cancer, and those ones that are specific for a particular cancer type or particular disease, they play an important role in funding the research. So coming from the side of the foundation, how important, how do you guys see that role into filling the gap?
Yeah, I think that research foundations also fund different types of research as well. The Ovarian Cancer Research Foundation, we're the largest non-government funder of ovarian cancer research in Australia. So we funded $33 million in ovarian cancer research in our time, which is incredible. We really fund the kind of seed research, the novel early stage discovery research that I think a lot of government funders don't fund. You kind
Mm-hmm.
of need to have a level of preclinical data to get funding a lot of the time. So I really like how the OCRF kind of not takes risks, but looks at really new and novel ideas and funds them. And that kind of seed funding allows them to go on and get leverage funding from government programs. So I think that's one really important role for research foundations. I think what I've seen working at the OCRF as well is that we're not just a funder. We have other ways that we can drive ovarian cancer research progress. Even though we do provide research grants, we've also led national consultations with researchers and with individuals with lived experience of ovarian cancer. We've built national and international collaborations. We've done a lot of advocacy and awareness work. So, and we're kind of doing a lot of collaboration as well, where we're kind of attempting to break down the silos between research institutions.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that's what's really exciting for me working in a research foundation, is that there are so many ways that we can make impact, and I really enjoy being able to step back and look at the entire ovarian cancer research field and say, this is how we can make a difference.
Yeah, that's great. And in your experience, we as a scientist, sometimes we are sort of little bubbles, and we could not understand or grasp because we are always thinking about the science, about the research, etc. So what do we miss to realize as a scientist in relation to the now that you are inside in the research foundation?
Yeah. And I think you saying that the scientists are in silos and in bubbles, it's not entirely the fault of the researcher as well, because you have such competitive funding streams and there's not enough research funding. So you can't help but go in your little silos because you don't want to be beaten out by someone else. So yeah, unfortunately that's the research culture. But yeah, I think when you're inside science, it's really, really easy to see your research as data, as discovery, and you can get really bogged down in those details and lose sight of that bigger picture. And what I've really learned at the OCRF is that the real impact happens when your research is connected to the people that your research is meant to serve. I think it's so important to embed individuals with lived experience right from the start of research. A lot of people think, well, I'm doing super early stage discovery research. I don't need to bring patient advocates in at this point. But I think you'd be so surprised at the insights that they can bring. And I've really learned that, these individuals bring so much value and passion to the project. And
Yeah.
it's a collaboration as well. I mean, and you're working with them, they're working with you. It's constant feedback, it's back and forth. You're building a relationship with them. It's not tokenistic. Yeah, so a lot of my role at the foundation is looking at how we can bridge that connection between the researchers and
Mhm.
the needs of people with ovarian cancer.
Yes, I totally certify that. I only
Hmm.
experienced that my science, my research, when I started talking, for example, with the melanoma WA, when I started talking to them, it changes you as a person as well as a scientist.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we, as scientists, we are interested in answer this question because it's very intellectually challenging,
Hmm.
but it doesn't mean that it's going to be translated and it's going to be impacting the people or the
Yeah.
relatives and the patients. And that's why it's important when you go and speak to them, you started to see your science reflected on their eyes and
Hmm.
you started to see what is important for them that is coming from your science.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you need to empower them as well to
Yeah.
understand the science. Scientists can be scary. I don't think we're scary, but you know, people can be scared of us. So I think
Yes.
it's also about breaking down those barriers.
Yeah. They might have because they might say that we are like a little bit crazy based on the
Yeah.
movies,
Yes, true. We are.
but we are a little bit. And that's why my next question is like, we
Hmm.
act as a different breed, right?
Yeah.
We speak in a particular language in sort of, because we want it to be look as an intellectual, is because it's a way that we can communicate. One way that can communicate with scientists is different to how we can communicate with a person who you're having a barbecue, etc. So how do you think as scientists we should break those walls?
Yeah, I like to say to people that a lot of a science degree is learning a language because you learn so many acronyms
Mm-hmm.
just to enable you to be able to talk to other scientists. I think moving into my honors and my PhD, I was really excited to learn all of these new and exciting terms that made me sound really smart, but it's something that you have to unlearn.
Mm-hmm.
And during my PhD, I got involved in a lot of scientific communication, like 3-minute thesis, which is where you explain your thesis in 3 minutes using lay language. And I'd also volunteer at community events when I could as well. And I think that was probably the best thing that I could do during my PhD. And I think communicating your science in a way that's accessible is so important. And it also allows you to better understand your research because you really have to know what you're talking about if you're explaining it in a simple way. During my postdoc, I started an Instagram to, I guess, talk about my science. I started it because of Frocktober, which is an OCRF fundraiser. It's a month-long fundraiser where people hold events and wear lots of dresses and share awareness and information about ovarian cancer. And I thought, well, this is perfect for me because I know a lot about ovarian cancer research. So I
Mm-hmm.
started my Instagram for Frocktober. I raised some money for the OCRF and this is where I really practiced how to explain complex scientific terms in a lay way. And it's all about practice. It's, I think you don't have to do it on this big stage or anything like that. You can talk to your friends or your family about your research. But yeah, I think ever since moving to the OCRF as well, I've learned that science is a story.
Mhm.
People are drawn to stories and, that human connection as well. So you really have to sell the science as a story. I think that's really important. Translating science as well is important because it builds trust with individuals. If you can explain the science in a way that they understand and also listen to other people's concerns, they're more likely to trust you. It's important for decision makers as well, politicians, and, to have the community feel like they're part of the
Yeah.
scientific process. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why, for example, Arutho in his episode, he was talking about that it takes a village, right? He's always using this term, and it has to be a patient. That is, the patient is the center of the particular village where everyone is not just the scientist that is there, but it's also the research foundations. One of the purpose and the reason behind that we science is because it's not just involving scientists, it's also involving that we as a collaborative working towards science, because we as a scientists, we driving the scientific progress and the research, but we need the support from the research foundations, from the different inclinations, from the different funders, from philanthropy, from different ones to go towards the common goal, which is cure cancer. Our goal is to cure cancer, and then
Absolutely.
a cure a disease, etc. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And
it's
the
important.
community, that's who we do the science for.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely. So I just wanted to ask you about a patient, maybe a relative of a patient that is being diagnosed with ovarian cancer and is seeing all these, the advances that are happening, etc. What do you say to a patient or a relative in terms of from the scientific point of view and also from the as a senior research advisor to them? In terms of, like we are working towards, it's just that there are some challenges that are biological, etc. So
Yeah. I think that's a really complex question. And I think the thing is when you're talking to someone that's been directly impacted by ovarian cancer, it's really important to not be bogged down in the statistics and
mhm.
the prognosis. You can firstly talk to the hope of what your research offers. But like you said, there are challenges and it's about being honest about
Mhm.
about those challenges as well. Science isn't easy and maybe they can help with those challenges as well.
Yeah, from a biological perspective, as we were discussing, you were mentioning before, it's very hard to, we are still in 2025, still battling to understand the biology of those leader cells
Yeah.
and all the
Not
different
just
ones.
the
So then
biology of leader cells either, the biology of ovarian cancer because it's so complex.
exactly. So then when you
Yeah.
have 30 subtypes, etc., it's very hard to identify and be able to sort of find the right treatment for the particular right cells in the right at the right time, which is the premise of the precision medicine that you were talking about. So
Yeah.
then it's important that everyone is making, is providing their bit, like to be able to sort of advance, to advance and towards a cure of cancer or any particular disease, in this case, ovarian cancer.
Yeah.
It's important that patients, everyone is involved in that particular, providing that bit so we can
Exactly.
progress faster. If we were in 1990, we're still thinking, oh, by 2020, we will have the cure.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
and then people outside see, oh, nothing of that research is being translated so far. It's because there are some challenges, big challenges. There are
Yeah.
biological, technical, funding, etc., etc., etc. So
Yeah, but there also are some really great advances as well. I mean, look at technology. If you had a look in the 90s, how long it took you to sequence just one gene, and now you can
yeah,
sequence a whole genome for $1,000 in I don't even know how long, a couple of hours probably.
yeah,
So, yeah, the technology has improved massively, and we have seen some survival benefits in cancer. But yeah, we
yeah,
need we need to do more. We need more funding. We need more collaboration.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, what factors do you think contribute to your success in science? And what were you were mentioning before about the collaboration, but you also mentioning about bias as well as bullying. Could you please expand on those challenges that are very critical for a success in your career?
Yeah, I think what I've learned is that it's really important to have really good mentors and supporters in research that can kind of help you address those challenges and address that bias. And even, even in bullying, for example, for them to say, yes, this is real. Yes, this is happening. It's not in your head. So I think above everything, it's so important to have people that you look up to and people that you can talk to. That's what I've learnt, I think, throughout my research career.
Yeah, in terms of challenges, like
Mm.
what sort of challenges do you face as a gender bias, imposter syndrome?
Yeah. So not just specific to me, I think it's really important to look at our sector as a whole. Particularly, I'm a massive advocate for women in research. I think that it's really important to think about the challenges faced by women in the research sector as a whole. There is a massive disparity in representation of women at a senior level.
Mhm.
If you look at senior leaders in STEM, about 30% of them are women. You go back to the early stage researchers, there's about a 50-50 split. So
Uh-huh.
there's something happening here. There's a lot of gender bias going on. There's career interruptions, not just maternity, caregiving. There's often, like you mentioned, bullying, um, bias. So I'm very much driven by inequities in women's health.
Uh-huh.
Ovarian cancer is underfunded, it's underprioritized. As I've mentioned, it's often diagnosed too late. But also on a personal level, I have endometriosis, and that really showed me what it's like to be a woman in trying to navigate the healthcare system, a system that wasn't built for women in mind. So that really
Uh-huh.
fuels my advocacy and my passion. I think it's incredibly important that we have diversity in STEM. I was lucky enough to be selected for the Superstars of STEM program, so which teaches us how to communicate our science to the
Uh-huh.
public. I think programs like that are so important, that gets women and diverse individuals at the forefront talking about science, because that's how, we're going to drive change and reduce those inequity barriers. So yeah, my passion is making science visible, making it accessible, and making sure that it's inclusive.
You also were talking about that the health system is not 100% built for women. So could you please expand on that?
Yeah, I don't remember what the actual percentage was, but it was something like 60 something percent or maybe 70% of women have experienced medical misogyny in the past year.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So, I've kind of experienced it going to the doctors as well. As someone who knows quite a lot about women's health, I'm not a medical doctor, but I'm a researcher. I understand science. And just, if you complain of symptoms, the dismissal that you get from some doctors is quite confronting. And I'm able to advocate for myself because I have some kind of understanding of
Mm.
science. I'm a white woman who speaks English as her first language, so it's a lot easier for me. But, those barriers persist much more for other individuals, for individuals that don't speak English as a first language, regional and rural people that don't have access to those, that kind of healthcare. So I think it's incredibly important to recognize this because, yeah, if we recognize this, then we can think about ways to address it.
So what does it mean to you to be a female scientist?
I think it's that representation that's so important to me.
Uh-huh.
I still actually have some people that come up to me and say, I wouldn't think that you're a scientist, which
Really?
is, yeah, it's kind of this bias that is projected into us when we're younger. You don't have women that like to dress up and have bright pink hair I know this is a podcast, but I have bright pink hair. You know,
No,
as
that is video. That is
yeah,
video.
okay, yeah. You know, as a scientist, and I think it's really important to get that representation. So being a woman in science, if I can increase visibility for the younger generation to show
Mhm.
them, if you are passionate about science, it doesn't matter, you know, what you look like or where you come from, you can do it.
Touching on that, so what advice do you give to junior scientists in terms of career progression, science communication, and patient engagement? You already mentioned about some parts before, but
Yeah. I mentioned finding mentors. I think that's really
Mhm.
important. Not just formal mentors. You don't have to get a formal mentor when you're, you know, in your undergrad degree if you don't want to, but people that you look up to and that you can talk to and that really guides your career decisions. I think something that I have realized is you need to find something that energizes you. Don't do something because you think that you should do it, but it doesn't really interest you. If you find something that energizes you, that gives you energy and that you're passionate about, follow that passion.
Mhm.
And that, you know, that works beyond science as well. I've touched on this as well, but really take advantage of learning how to communicate your science well and engaging with individuals that might be affected by your research. You know, it's not just health research as well. You can think about the end users or people that might be
Mhm.
interested in your research, even if it's, you know, astronomy or something. Who's going to be interested in the stars and the planets? Think about that and engage with those people and learn how to communicate your science in a way that makes sense.
Great. And then my final question is, you mentioned about Frocktober. Could you please share how we can participate in Frocktober?
Absolutely. I would love to talk about Frocktober. So it is a month-long fundraiser to raise money and awareness for the Ovarian Cancer Research Foundation, raising important funds for ovarian cancer research. So you can go to the OCRF website. There's also a specific Frocktober website, and you can have a look at the Frocktober Instagram. So I think it's
Mhm.
Frocktober_OCRF. Don't quote me on that, but that sounds about right. And you can have a look at the many ways that you can sign up. So I'm doing a dress every day and posting on social media with some information about ovarian cancer, but you don't have to do that. A lot of people are holding events. Some people are doing a bake sale for a day. Some people are selling their clothes. Some people are doing frock at work, which is where everyone dresses up, you know, for a morning tea at work and you take photos and raise some
Mhm.
money. So that's something that I really like about the Frocktober campaign is it's so diverse. Anyone can be involved. There's lots of ways that you can be involved. You can, you know, if you don't want to get dressed up or you don't want to hold an event, you can share the information on social media. You can share the information with your friends and your family, anything to get the word out. So that's Frocktober. And yes, please check it out because it's an awesome campaign.
Awesome. And also we will share it also in our socials. So thank you,
Amazing.
Amy, for sharing your journey, your story. And it was a great honor to have you here in this podcast. I really had fun because we share so many common interests. And also thank you for all the advocacy that you are working at the moment doing in ovarian cancer and everything that you're doing to expand the boundaries of science so people know more about what science is, what the scientists do, etc. So thank you so much for sharing, for being so open in this podcast. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun.
Cheers. Yeah.